What if you could redesign an entire nation from the ground up? A nation of 1.4 billion people. Well, today, we're breaking down a real proposal that was actually submitted to the Indian government, and it aims to do just that, with an absolutely staggering $75 trillion vision at its core. I mean, seriously, think about it for a second. It's a huge question. Where would you even begin? Do you start with the economy, with infrastructure, or do you try to reshape society itself? It's a fascinating thought experiment, and we're about to see one group's incredibly detailed answer.
And this isn't just some academic daydream. We are diving deep into a formal document from an organization called the OneEarth Alliance. They've laid out a radical, and I mean radical, step-by-step vision for India's next couple of decades.
Okay, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at that big headline number. Then we'll get into the three pillars of the whole plan: a totally new energy grid, a new way of structuring society, and a new engine for R&D. And finally, we'll see how they argue this whole thing could actually pay for itself. All right, let's start with the big picture. What's the ultimate goal here? Where is this grand roadmap supposed to lead? Well, it all boils down to one mind-boggling number. There it is, $75 trillion. Just to put that into perspective for you, that is more than 3 times the size of the entire U.S. economy right now. The document sets this as the target for India's economy by 2045. And really, that audacious goal is the sun that every other part of this plan orbits around. But the authors argue this isn't just wishful thinking. They say a number this big can't be an accident. It has to be the result of a solid foundation, and they've designed one built on 3 core interconnected pillars that are meant to completely reshape the country from the ground up. So let's get into that first pillar. According to this blueprint, a national transformation doesn't start with new laws or big speeches. It starts with power, literally, and a completely new way of thinking about where it comes from. The key piece of technology here is something called a thorium small modular reactor, or SMR. Now, these aren't your grandpa's giant, sprawling nuclear plants. The idea is that they're much smaller, inherently safer, and you can deploy them locally, almost anywhere, to provide clean, reliable power 24/7. So the plan is pretty wild. They want to put these SMRs, along with geothermal energy, directly into 300,000 villages. This would create a decentralized grid, basically flipping the current model on its head. The goal is to generate over 2,300 gigawatts of power by 2045, and in the process, get rid of all that energy that's wasted sending electricity over long power lines. And they're not messing around. They want a 5-megawatt pilot plant up and running like yesterday. And this quote from the document really says it all. You can feel the urgency. The authors are basically saying, look, India has been researching thorium for decades. Enough talk. It's time to act and use that research to leapfrog everyone else. Okay, so once you have cheap, abundant energy of the local level, what do you do with it? Well, this brings us to the second pillar, which involves rethinking the most basic unit of society. Forget about megacities for a second. This whole plan is built around the village. They call this concept the Smart Village model, and the core idea is to transform villages from just being these quiet agrarian places into powerful, self-reliant economic hubs that are completely plugged into modern technology. And when you dig into the details, wow, it's a lot. The proposal says these villages would be run kind of like companies, with appointed CEOs instead of traditional elected leaders. It also specifically states they would operate on a zero corruption and zero reservation basis, which is a pretty direct challenge to India's existing affirmative action policies. Each village would power itself, have its own R&D labs and small industries, and, this is huge, be economically deregulated to encourage as much local growth as possible. All right, so we've got decentralized power and these supercharged autonomous villages. The third pillar is all about creating the grain power to connect everything and fuel nonstop growth and new ideas. The idea here is to build what the document calls a national nervous system for research and development. This isn't about just a few fancy institutes in the capital. We're talking about a distributed network of more than 150 different types of specialized labs, with the goal of making them accessible to literally everyone, no matter where they live. And they get really specific about this national lab grid. It would cover everything from AI and quantum computing to space and agro-tech. The whole system is designed for seamless digital integration and, get this, zero delay service, meaning Anyone should be able to get what they need from a lab within 24 to 48 hours, plus total financial accountability. And each lab would be required to spin out new, high-impact innovations every single year. So, a new energy grid, a new model for society, a new engine for innovation. I know what you're thinking. This sounds unbelievably expensive. So, how on earth could it be paid for? Well, this is where the proposal gets really interesting, because it looks at a major global precedent to make its case. The authors point directly at China's incredible economic rise as their main case study. They argue that what happened in China wasn't some kind of miracle. They say it was engineered, very deliberately, through decades of massive strategic investment by the state in a few key areas. According to the proposal's analysis, China's growth was a direct result of these smart investments. Pouring money into infrastructure didn't just build things, it made it cheaper for everyone to do business. Investing heavily in STEM education created a huge skilled workforce, and ramping up R&D spending created technological independence. The key takeaway here is that these weren't just expenses, they were investments that paid off over and over again. And if you want to see the result of that strategy, just look at this chart. The numbers are absolutely mind-blowing. The document points out that China's economy, when you adjust for purchasing power, grew an estimated 32 times over. That is the benchmark the proposal uses to show what is possible with this kind of focused, long-term national investment. So using that same investment-focused logic, the proposal then projects its own return on investment for India. And what's really interesting is that while the energy and village infrastructure investments are projected to have strong returns, the biggest bang for the buck, up to a 12x multiplier, is projected to come from building that national R&D and skills infrastructure. And this brings us right back to where we started. The document's conclusion is that a strategic investment of something in the ballpark of $3 to $5 trillion into these core pillars could create a massive economic ripple effect, eventually generating a total return that hits that initial target, $75 trillion by 2045. So, at the end of the day, what do we make of this? It is, without a doubt, one of the most comprehensive and radical national blueprints probably ever written down. And it leaves us with the ultimate question. Is this a practical roadmap for creating a future superpower, or is it a vision that is simply too vast, too ambitious to ever actually build? That's the debate at the heart of this entire proposal.